We expected a lot more people, but that does not negate the fact that we have people in this room. They can hear me. We have can you hear me? Yeah. We have people in this room who have, a need and a right to express themselves about however they feel about this. So we're going to continue with our original plan. You all have an agenda, and we're going to have our 3 speakers who registered in advance. And then, are you Mrs. Wiggle? No. Oh, you are. I'm sorry. I didn't get a chance to when you came in. So the order here is that Kathy Bordner registered first, so Kathy's going to start us out. Then Mr.
Bartlett.
Yes, Bartlett. You will be second, and then you will be third. Okay. 5 minutes to present. But what we're going to do, because there's so few people here, I think what we should do is that each of you make your presentation and begin your question and answer then, as long as you keep it in a reasonable amount. It's silly for us to go through that procedure with this few people. So we're going to do that, and then we'll see if other people come in. They might have gotten the time wrong or something, but then we'll proceed as planned. If we can leave early, we'll leave early. We'll decide that as a group, okay? Right? So Kathy, do you want to?
Yeah, can you introduce your committee?
Oh, so that would be great.
Oh, yeah.
I know nobody.
Yes. This is Rory. I'm blanking. Carol. Sorry. This is Rory Carroll, and Rory has his degree in. Did someone say something? No. Has his doctorate in environmental science, right? Mm-hmm. And we're very lucky to have him. He has been out with his students out in the hinterlands teaching students this summer, so we're very, very glad that he's able to join us. All of these people volunteered their time, stepped forward, and gave us their expertise and their experience. So, and next is Barry. I am blanking. Kisloff. And Barry is a long-term resident in Churchill, and he is a gastroenterologist, a man interested in science, and who was the one who came to me and with research he'd done on his own and prompted the creation of this committee. And then there's Greg Prodanovich. Greg is a person who has extensive experience in public park management. So he's had all the things to go through in terms of addressing the problems of deer, and he has also addressed the problems of deer in his own community. He is the president of the Citizens Group in Ridgewood, a section of Churchill. So that is all 3 of our panelists. And anything else you'd like me to say before you start? Okay, have at it.
Well, first I'm going to say I never dreamed I'd have 5 minutes to speak. That's a long time.
Well, it's not a council meeting or anything.
I know. So I don't think I'm going to be taking 5 minutes. I was hoping, and perhaps throughout the evening, we will get a recap of what your committee has done since you were formed, because I'm very interested in hearing that information. Just a tiny bit about myself and my husband, Dave, who's with me tonight. We moved to the Pittsburgh area in 2018 to help our daughter and son-in-law with their growing family. In 2019, we moved to our home on Hampstead Drive in Churchill. And so we've been here since 2019. My background is in social services in the state of Missouri. We lived in Missouri for about 30 years. And we were also both very involved in historic preservation in Missouri, and I served on the Historic Preservation Commission and on boards of organizations. something else about Dave and I is that, and also we farmed for 10 years in the Boot Hill of Missouri back in the 80s. The Boot Hill is that little thing that sticks down at the bottom southeast corner. And we've always tried to have a nice yard. For many years we gardened. We're very into trying to make our home as attractive as we can. And since we don't have millions of dollars to, build fancy facades, we kind of try to enhance our yard. And we've always done that. I think that Churchill is the first place that I have seen the extent of overpopulation of deer, although we did have a problem in Jefferson City with deer. I had beautiful daylilies, and they were just getting ready to blossom, and I'd go out, and they were just all cut, snipped right off. And I thought maybe my neighbor had it in for me, but I realized later it was a deer. But what we're seeing here, we're very concerned about. Our house on Hampstead, if you all know the little house on Beulah Road that has like a lighthouse and a little pond. I think years ago they had the ducks. Yeah. Well, our house is the house above that. And I think that there's a herd of deer that just come up the hill from that area up to our house. Our neighbor next door has talked about having a group that camps out in his backyard. I was out the other night on my front porch like at probably 11 p.m. or later, and 3 or 4, just casually walked by. It's very common for us to see the deer. They are obviously, consuming, a lot of what we grow. We don't bother with vegetables because it would be a waste of time. So I'm very concerned about the overpopulation. I would like to know the number of deer that the borough can support and the number that we do have. And I've heard in the past that there was a survey done, it was years ago, that came up with that number. I'm sure it's different. And so I'd like to know what those numbers are now. I'd like to know past efforts to address the deer. I've heard that there was a culling in the past. I'd like to know what that cost and what the results of it were. I'd like to know the impacts that the deer overpopulation is having in this region. The number of accidents. Are we seeing an increase of diseases that the deer spread among people? Is there any kind of assessment of the effect of diseases on deer? I'd also like to know what other areas are doing. What is Pittsburgh doing? I've heard that Forest Hills is doing a culling. Basically, I've heard that O'Hara or that area has had a long ongoing project. And I would also like to have a recap of the last meeting that was held about the deer. And if you don't have that available, I do recall it, that I'd be happy to give that if you guys don't have that information. So, and finally, I just want to say I do support a culling of the deer. I want to be upfront and honest about that. I think that the overpopulation affects people. I think it also affects the deer. I think many people are trying to protect the deer and don't want a culling, but I think that the impact of that is that it's hurting the deer. And so I think that that's a direction that we should seriously consider going into. So I think I've gone over 5 minutes, so there you go.
You're not bound to 5 minutes because since there's so few people here, we're just going to go forward, Okay.
Well, then I do want to go ahead and give that recap of the last meeting. I don't know how many people were here over a year ago.
There were 40 people here.
Okay.
Seal was here and so was Deb and Paul.
Yeah.
I don't have minutes for you, but I can tell you that my impression was everybody was concerned about the deer. Mm-hmm. Everybody was concerned about what we can do about the deer. Mm-hmm. But in the course of the conversation, most people seemed to understand that it was a very complex issue. And I think some of what I said then, I would say now. A lot of the information that people try to gather, online or looking at what other people have done or other places or success rates or whatever else, which we discussed at that time, what we have to do is to look at all of those things and all of those options in the context of our reality here. We're a 3,000 person community that is surrounded by larger communities, and the deer don't know borders. So if you start with that premise that we're a tightly packed residential community, and deer, in fact, I will just say quickly, this is not part of that meeting, but since then, the information we get from our borough employees and others, it's very likely that we have more than one herd of deer that are interacting here in Churchill. Some of the evidence of that is that we've had, a dramatic reduction in the number of deer-car collisions in the last 5 years in Churchill. So we think there's a possibility that part of the reason for that is because there are 3 different herds. And they're not crossing the main thoroughfares the way they did. And particularly north and south here, Penn Hills and Blackridge. That's probably one of the herds. And there's probably a herd that extends into Forest Hills and extends into Wilkins. So the first question is, and you had asked this question, how do you count the deer? And a lot of the programs that talk about developing a management plan, one of the very first things you have to do is know how many deer you're dealing with. So if you want to get how many deer are too many deer in Churchill, you need to find out how many deer there are.
Right.
So that's just some of the complexities we talked about. My takeaway from when we left here was that we all understood each other. We all understood what the problems were, and we all were sad that there wasn't an immediate ready solution to that. And that's part of why we resurrected. Barry prompted us to resurrect it in a different way, and to try to get some wonderful people who really have education, background, experience in dealing with this question, and doing deeper dive into the evidence. So does that answer your question?
It does, and I'm glad you brought up the 3 herds.
Yeah.
Because what I have read in the research I've done is that they do tend to interact in herds, and they don't go out and venture out into other areas. So that it would seem like we have is these herds that are reproducing and reproducing and reproducing. And although there is, we don't have wolves, but we have coyotes, and I've heard that the coyotes go after the fawns.
Yes.
But that's the only predator we have, and it's really the does that are the ones that are, causing the population. Which I hate to put it on the female, but that's just the way it is. But and also. I'm interested in what the last time you did a culling, what the cost of that was, and what, like Forest Hills, has there been any reaching out to the other communities, to find out what their cost is?
Well, again, in each of those situations, it's complicated.
Which I understand that, but I do think that, getting some basic information to us will help us to be able to make the decision about whether or not we're happy with, what you're talking about doing. Because, and I did, when you were talking, there was something that came up in my mind, but I should have jotted it down, but I didn't. But anyway, well, I'll step down and let the next person speak, and I'm looking forward to learning tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think too many people here know you, so will you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron Markowitz. I'm a resident of Blackridge here on the Churchill side, because that's a Triborough area. We're a nice little group of people. I've been in Blackridge since '98. Never really left too long. I'm a student at Penn State. I study fishery and wildlife sciences. A little bit of my upbringing, because I live in Blackridge, what was really nice was there's a good little plot of woods behind the Blackridge Park and the pool. That was supposed to be a road, but all of the property lines were too close to where the road was going to be built. So if you look at a map online, there's actually a paper road up there, but it's just all woods because they were never able to get anyone in. What's nice about that is it created this beautiful, beautiful haven for kids to have adventures in and to play and build forts in the woods and campsites and all kinds of cool stuff. But you also get to see a lot of the wildlife native to this region. I've spent countless hours just goofing off in there and seeing all kinds of interesting critters. Every now and then we get turkeys. We have a ton of deer. I'll get to that later. I've seen fox, skunk, opossum, raccoon, barn owls, great horned owls, screech owls, you name it, we have it. Surprisingly enough, it's a small patch of woods in there. But what's really nice is right next to it was the country club. And unfortunately, the country club is no longer. Now it's a giant greenway, which is provided a huge opportunity for creating better habitat for these wildlife. So you've gone from a small patch of woods to a huge plot of land that they're able to access easier because there's less human interference down there. I say less because, while it was a country club, everyone was on every inch of that property. Now that you have the greenway and everyone has designated paths, people are interacting with animals. However, they are sticking to their designated zones and everyone's sort of able to live in some form of harmony. Obviously, a lot of people here have concerns about whether or not there are too many deer, whether or not there needs to be population reductions. Is there enough food for the deer? What's going on, and how many car collisions are being caused by the numbers that we have currently? And those are all valid concerns. I know that many people with higher influences are against culling, against population control, and they do have valid reasons for that, and I respect those reasons. Me personally, I can only speak for this area of Churchill, Penn Hills, and Blackridge. I do not know about the deer populations near Westinghouse. I don't know the population near Wilkins Township, near the park down there in Pennhurst, and I don't know the populations near Greensburg Pike. So I won't talk about them. I will talk about the populations here. We have 3 or 4. There's one large herd, and they intermingle from Penn Hills into Churchill via Bullock's Pen Park and the Country Club, or the Greenway. On average, you'll see around 12 to 15 individuals in that herd. Some years there are more, some years there are less. You have a mother and daughter that every year hang out in Blackridge, and it's nice because those two are by themselves and they help raise their kids together. The reason why was, my best guess is they get bullied away from the bigger herd in the Penn Hills area. And so they just rely on each other to raise their young. And Blackridge is a very safe community. There's not a lot of, for better terms, hooligans messing around doing stupid stuff. So it's a nice place to raise kids, both human and deer. So I got to give credit where credit's due. And then there's also a couple groups of bucks. There's one large buck that roams by himself. He's, I guess, a major breeder because he's been around long enough. And there's 2 brothers. They're a little immature, but they hang around with each other and help fend off the bigger buck. Personally, I believe that the reason why there's so much property damage is because there's poor nutritional diversity in the woods around this area, including in the Greenway. I wish to speak to the Allegheny Land Trust on this because they would know more about their property than I ever will. concerning whether or not the browse is mostly native or non-native and what their management plan is. I know that they have a huge plan for revamping everything. That takes a lot of time and money. I completely understand that. But I just wanted to know like what their plans were for increasing nutritional diversity. You know, a lot of the forage out there is grasses and greens, and deer will feed on that a little bit into the spring and summer. But typically they'll look for other things like shrubs, broadleaf plants. They're looking for berries. In the fall, they're looking for nuts. They're looking for high fat content items. They're looking for high protein because they're trying to put on weight for the winter. And what happens is if they don't find it out there, they're going to find it in your backyard. And we see this, every single one of us here has probably had some kind of deer damage in regarding gardens and plants. And just as this lady said prior to me, she doesn't have a vegetable garden because what's the point? The deer are going to get to it before she ever will. So I understand, you know, and that is very expensive on us because, you know, if there's 3,000 families and you're looking at like anywhere between $150 to $250 worth of buying plants, fixing plants, building fences and stuff, multiply that by a couple thousand people, that's a lot of money being spent on deer out of pocket. My question is, if you're looking at culls or population control, I would say I'm neither against or for it at this point because I don't have appropriate statistics to show whether or not it would be effective, if it would be cost efficient. And I will say, if you were going to do it, I would go after the large herd in this region. As I said, I can only speak on this region. That herd needs it the most because every year I see those deer in the winter times. They have poor fur, they have poor coats. They're patchy. The fur is falling out because they're malnourished. And so what happens is those guys have harder time surviving the winter. What happens is the larger adults will pick on the yearlings and bully them away from the food so they get the food, the yearlings die, right? Because as the lady before me said prior, we don't have a distinguishable amount of predators in the area to help maintain that population. Yes, we do have some coyotes. I remember in 2020, I saw 3 carcasses amongst the greenway of relatively large-sized deer, I will say. But besides that, if they're going after the weak animals, while that is natural, there should be a couple members of that larger herd reduced from the healthier groups because that will help produce a larger abundance for food for the survivors. And if culling is expensive, have members of the community volunteer. I am a hunter. I'm a hunter. I legally hunt. I know 4 other members of my neighborhood alone that also hunt. If I was allowed to hunt in this area, I don't want to be paid. I'll take the deer. And if I don't have room for the deer, what I would do is I would donate the meat to the food shelters. The Game Commission has a thing called the Harvest Fund. It's a giant food bank, and most of the extra game meat that people get donate to there, and then it goes to homeless shelters. And I think that'd be a very cost-effective way of doing a cull if you were for a cull. I just wanted to bring that up as a potential idea. Crash reports, I haven't heard much, but from what I've heard, crash reports are down, but that's probably because the deer are too busy spending time in people's neighborhoods to be fooling around on Beulah Road, Long Road, and 376. I will say this, however, last year, driving down 376 towards the back road up by Beulah Church, I saw 3 carcasses from deer trying to cross the highway and cross there. All right, were those the stupid ones or were those the unlucky ones? I can't say. But I will say this, as of this year, I haven't seen a single deer carcass in this area. So I don't know if it's a behavioral issue or if the numbers are low enough to where they're not having to move around as much. If you were not for supporting a call or hiring someone to do that, then at least what I would do is try to put together funding for improving habitat and nutritional abundance. What I mean by that is looking at the parks that we have now, if there are areas where like it's a no-mow zone just because of terrain, I would spray it because controlled burns are a pain in the butt in this area. I would spray that with pesticides, get rid of all the non-native grass, and I'd put up native grass to help promote habitat for the winter and for the fawnings, because the fawns will hide in high grass. It helps protect them from predators. If the coyotes can't find the babies, they'll go for the adults, and that'll also help. If you were to do a culling or allow hunters to cull, have them focus on does, not bucks. If you take out one doe, you reduce the population for next year by 3. If you take out a buck, you reduce the population for next year by 1. That is coming from the Game Commission particularly. Furthermore, with whatever parks we have, I would also advise planting fruit trees or nutting trees. That way those animals will be able to get good nutrients and build up higher fat content and protein contents to survive the winter. And by doing this, if you have these food sources in the parks and also, talk to the land trust to see if they'd be down for it as well, you're keeping them out of the yards because they're finding good food on their own, and they're not having to go after our neighbors' gardens. They're not having to go after our vegetables. They're finding stuff on their own. If you were looking into population counts and surveys, I took a class on this last spring. I would look into investing in a couple cheap trail cams, putting them up near where people say, "Hey, I see deer all the time." Ask them if you'd be able to put up a couple trail cams, and literally like once a week, just go out and check to see what you find. You'll find a lot more than deer. You'll find all kinds of stuff out there. Also, if you look at organizations such as the Audubon Society or the Big Bird Watchers, those guys are phenomenal whenever it comes to citizen reports on bird species across the nation. They literally say, "Hey, we need help with information gathering. We want your guys' help because you guys live here. Whatever you find, give to us, and then we'll collect it, and we'll be able to have a good, almost whole data account for the whole region." I would advise either setting up some kind of website or maybe some kind of group chat or a little huddle space where people are able to submit information that will hopefully help you guys with your jobs. Not jobs, because I know you guys are volunteers, but with what you guys have on your shoulders, I should say. And if you guys are interested in what kind of plants would be beneficial for future projects like this, I'd be more than happy to help out. But also, I might be able to talk to a couple higher ups in the Penn State area, because we do a lot of stuff with the Game Commission. So I apologize for taking up so much of your time, but I hope this has been able to give some ideas as to what we can actually do. And if we don't have the funding for it, that's fine. You'd be surprised how many people like yourselves would be able to volunteer and give you guys an extra hand. Just keep your ears open and your minds open as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does anybody in the group want to try to respond to some of the things that were raised?
Well, I just have one question vis-a-vis a cull. Certain parts of the state have been designated by the Game Commission to sell antlerless licenses. Extra. For instance, and I have a list: Erie, Crawford, Mercer, Venango. That's how you start looking things up, you get really lost. But there's about 10 counties. Would it benefit us to get the State Game Commission to declare this an area of, I wouldn't know the right term, excessive? Because clearly excessive deer populations have been declared in Crawford County. So is there perhaps an avenue might open up, so that funding is a big issue, as you pointed out.
Yes.
These counties are actually selling, and they go like hotcakes. These antlerless licenses go. So you wonder if we went to the Game Commission and said we have a problem, as you've so nicely articulated, whether they wouldn't just simply sell licenses, and how would the borough respond to that?
Well, so that's on a county level basis. So that's a little bit. That would be more broad scale than just Churchill Borough, Blackridge Borough, and whatever groups you have there. I would say the other major thing is in those counties that would particularly revolve around the public land. All of this land here is private, minus the parks, which are maintained by local government, of course. But like the property for Allegheny Land Trust and everyone's backyards, even the stuff in the up where the paper road is, that's all private property. So while those people have tags for the county and saying, hey, I'm able to harvest the doe in this county, they would need permission from those property owners to be on those properties and hunting around there. Now, I would say that there's a good chance that a lot of people would be willing to say, yeah, absolutely, go on here. Just make sure that you're safe. Just make sure that you're smart about doing what you do. I will say this, Pennsylvania hunters are the safest in the state in terms of accidents. We've had several years where people have not hurt themselves with their own harvesting instruments. No one's accidentally gotten shot. No one's shot their own buddy. I will say, and Diane brought this up earlier, and I do agree with her that there is a chance of this. Whenever you open up hunting areas, you're going to have a lot of safe hunters, and then you're going to have a lot of hooligans. My concern would be, is the risk worth the reward? And unfortunately, that answer is above my pay grade. I would personally say, based on what I've seen in this region alone, the risk would be worth it. What you could also do is just have designated volunteer hunters and approved by the borough to go in. Kind of like how the Allegheny Land Trust, some of their properties you're allowed to hunt there, you would submit a petition to the ALT and they'd say, okay, we approve you for this. And then whenever you're on the property, you would have that permission. You would also have the antlerless tag from the Game Commission. I think that's about it. I don't know if I answered your question entirely. Okay.
Can I point out something about that? We were in Cook Forest about a year ago, and I remember getting a pamphlet, I think about the program that you're talking about, where they designate certain counties and sell the licenses. And I would just imagine that Allegheny County would be supportive of that, considering what Pittsburgh is dealing with and in these other areas. So I think that's a very reasonable thing to be looking into. And I know it has to be, you're saying on state land, but there are, I'm sure, private property owners who would be agreeable to letting the people hunt on their land. And isn't Bullock Pin Park public land? I mean, if you just...
The complication with that, and I'm going to try not to be the responder here, but
That's
the
fine.
complication with that is that immediately abuts the Allegheny Land Trust property.
Yes.
So if the Allegheny Land Trust has determined that they are not willing to deal, well, I shouldn't say why they're saying no. They have their own reasons. But since it's seamless between Bullock's Pen Park and Allegheny Land Trust, it would be very difficult for us to have a controlled hunt just on Bullock's Pen Park.
How big is Bullock Pin Park?
It's about
I don't know his square footage.
about 27 acres.
Okay, so it's not that large.
No.
The other thing too is, I mean, we do have ordinances in the borough about discharging firearms, especially residents, and within so many feet of a home. You know, so I mean, I don't know what those boundaries are.
I was going to say, so in Allegheny County, it is illegal to hunt with a rifle for deer. You can use a shotgun. However, with regular, it's considered a regular firearm. With firearms near private properties, you would need 150 yards between the property border, and if you're within that, you have to ask the neighboring property for permission to go on the land in terms of either hunting it, or if you shoot a deer on your property and it runs onto their property, you need permission from that owner to go collect the deer. Archery, you need 50 yards. So you need a much smaller buffer because an arrow is not going to go as far as a bullet. So in terms of safety, in terms of stray shots, that area I would believe would be more appropriate for archery than something like shotgun. But at the end of the day, it comes to the property owners for permission to be near that. And in order to do anything effective, I would say that we would need to do a lot more communication and collaboration with the Allegheny Land Trust. Whether those guys have the time to even think about this or not, I don't know. I know those guys have a lot on their shoulders because they have owned several properties in the area. But I would also argue that one of their reservations for allowing hunting on this property would because they don't know what the intentions are of the neighboring communities, right? So because if you're stepping on someone's toes, that ruins your relationship with that community. However, if that community says, hey, we're opening up stuff to this, we want to know what your thoughts are on this, it allows for more collaborations, it allows for more understanding from both parties, and it allows for more progress being made. I personally called them and invited them to this meeting. Obviously, they didn't show up. I don't know if that's because they're too busy or if they don't care. That's up for them to answer. However, I do acknowledge that it would have been very nice to hear their thoughts and their side of the story on what their intentions are with that property.
Well, I would just say that the borough as an entity has very regular communication with Allegheny Land Trust, and we're involved in their planning for returning, for example, the stream to its natural. So we're involved at that level, the planning level. So there's good communication between our borough and Allegheny Land Trust. So, we can pass on what happens here this evening, and I think for them, from what I understand, it's a question of liability. The area where this is a much more densely packed population. Mm-hmm. Their other properties have much less dense population around them. When you add the preschool at the top of the hill over here, and Black Ridge, right abutting, their board made the decision that this property is not appropriate for hunting. I didn't make that decision. And the other thing I do want to clarify, and I'm sure you guys do too, there are two programs. One is the State Game Commission, and the other is the USDA program. And in the State Game Commission issue, you have to have properties that are big enough, private properties that are big enough to sustain this activity, and you have to have their permission. So I can tell you that in the past, we did not have the country club's permission. We did not have the Edgewood Country Club's permission. We did not have the Westinghouse property permission. Bullock's Pen Park is the only possibility.
And what was the reason that the property owners denied permission when you approached them?
They're different for different places. The Edgewood Country Club, it was again about liability. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to see some dead deer lying on the green. It's that they did not want to do that at all, and I respect that decision. The Westinghouse property, they think it's an asset for the sale of their property.
The deer farm.
Yeah, yeah.
Another misconception of the owners of that.
Well, that's again, it's private property. There's nothing, this private property is private property.
Yep.
So we don't have big parks like a lot of the other communities do. We don't have big parks like Fox Chapel. We don't have big parks like Mount Lebanon. We have just this, and it abuts an area that they have said we do not want hunting on this area. So
we have Schaefer School, which is another area where deer travel through. That's owned by the school district.
Yeah.
It's surrounded by homes.
Yeah.
I like what Mr. Markowitz has said about planting this food down on the green space.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, every year, the Land Trust and the people from Tree Pittsburgh get together. We've had at least 2 plantings so far. You can only plant trees.
Hundreds of trees, yes.
If you notice, there's a big fenced-in area down there. Mm-hmm. Go inside there, and that's where we're planting the trees. The reason being, the other trees were all those little tubes. Mm-hmm. They decided they didn't want to do the tubes anymore, so they fenced in that whole area. They're planting the trees inside there. Once they mature, that fence comes down and gets moved to another spot. This whole hillside, their plan is to reforest that whole hillside.
Right.
They are planting native trees in there. So once they mature, that could draw. I like the idea to draw the animals over to that area, but you're not going to get them all. But if we can get some of them over there, that's good. We could probably attract them over to the hospital. They like the hospital.
Yeah.
But, again, to get volunteers, when they have the tree plantings, they'll come in with 200 plus trees, and you get 5 people who show up. 5 people can't plant 200 trees.
No.
So when the word gets out to the community that they're having a tree planting, it'd be nice if people would come down and, help out a little bit.
I think also one of the issues is with Blackridge in particular. I don't know the numbers for Churchill per se, but I believe that a lot of the homeowners are middle-aged or above, and so so I do understand, like with plantings and stuff, you need a young person's back.
I get down there.
Well, no,
I get Medicare. I won't tell you my age.
but like a lot of people are like, oh, I would, but I'm not in this condition anymore.
But here's the deal too. When you do that, if you say I go down there and I dig the holes, because we were down there with high school kids. Now they're struggling to dig a hole. I was digging the holes. They put the tree in the hole and backfill. They go over and get the tree and bring it to the site. So I don't have to dig a hole, go get the tree, back. You kind of break that workload up again.
Yeah, I would throw in here, and then I want to give you a chance to respond.
Yeah.
We also know anecdotally, so take it for what it's worth, the areas of the borough where there are what seem to be the highest concentrations of deer, chances are real good somebody in your neighborhood is feeding the deer.
Absolutely.
And I know we have some in our own neighborhood who basically have troughs of deer food. So that's a whole other issue. And it accounts for a lot of variability in the population of the deer throughout Churchill. But I know Rory has some things he would like to share.
So I love your point about habitat, right? Like the deer population as a whole, and this is not an issue in Churchill or in Allegheny County or in whatever wildlife management unit we're in. It's all, like everywhere east of the Mississippi has this issue. So we're not alone in that. But I think the thing to remember is that the population is going to be as big as the habitat can support, right? And so and they're far roaming things. Like we can have perfect habitat with all kinds of native plants in Churchill Greenway. They're not all just going to stay there, right? Like I think around a square mile is like the average sort of home range for a deer, but they can travel way farther than that. Like the Game Commission just started a program where they put radio collars on deers, and they've tracked them 6 miles, right? And so they move around a lot. Maybe not, that was not in a suburban area where they have to cross the parkway and all that stuff. So I would be surprised if our deer moved that much, but they're never going to stay in that one area, right? So we could have perfect habitat there, and that's not going to solve our problems, right? But I think the idea of if we're interested in making sure that the deer that we do have are healthy, the idea of improving habitat in our borough, that kind of falls on us, right? As residents of the borough, not to be planting things that we know are just going to get eaten and not regenerate, but planting native things in our yards that have evolved with deer and can withstand some of that browse. Last year I planted a red osier dogwood in my backyard that probably a dozen mornings in the last year I've woken up and just seen it decimated. It's still growing back, right? And so I think kind of managing expectations and for what you can plant in your yard while kind of improving habitat can kind of help both sides of this equation, right? It's going to help the deer if we're worried about them being malnourished, and it's going to help sort of our own impression of what the problem is. But I think the other thing to remember, too, is, like you said, removing a doe is going to remove 3 individuals from the population because, on average, a doe is going to give birth to 2 young. But the mortality rate of those young, like on average, is like 50%. So on average, only one of those is going to survive. In Churchill, that's probably not the case because we don't have a lot of predators, right? We don't have, there's coyotes here, but I would be shocked if they're eating that many fawns. And so the thing to remember is part of that, like if you're seeing malnourished deer, that's kind of nature taking its course, right? If they're not going to get eaten by predators, they're going to suffer from malnutrition. And so that's kind of the flip side of that not having predators coin. that it's worth considering, in our in our situation, I guess.
Greg, do you have anything you'd like to add to that subject?
Yeah, I mean, it's the plants, it's every day. I have any number of neighbors approach me and say, oh, my hostas got wiped out today. Oh, my daylilies got wiped out today. It's completely random. The deer are not picking your house because you have
No, I disagree.
daylilies or hostas there. They're creatures that are constantly on the move, and they're going to just, whatever they see in front of them, if it's something they want, they're going to eat it. I know at my house, I have hostas everywhere. I haven't lost one hosta.
Me too.
I'm vigilant. I keep up with the deer repellent, and that's what I think a lot of it is. A lot of people say, oh, well, I sprayed them. I'm like, yeah, you sprayed them on Memorial Day, and it's July 4th, and you haven't sprayed them again, and your stuff's gone. Yes, you have to be vigilant. You have to stay on it, and it is a pain. There's nights where I'm like, oh, crap, I forgot to spray. I'm out there at 9 o'clock at night with my cell phone spraying my hostas. But in terms of like the native plants and everything, yes, it's plants that Rory said have kind of evolved along with deer. They tend to be a lot more resilient, and they could eat them down to the ground, but they are going to pop back up. What we've been trying to do this year with the deer committee is kind of more of a open information thing. It's not just, oh, these were the findings of the committee. We started to engage more on social media this year, putting posts out, plant this, not that. Not saying that, it's going to be guaranteed 100% results. They say stuff is deer resistant, but there is no such thing as a deer resistant plant. If they want it, they will eat it. They might not like it, but they will still bite at it, browse, whatever. But yeah, just trying to get information out to people so that people could say, oh, hey, and then it's nice because it's on a digital platform. You could go back 10 years from now and you could say, oh, what was that one plant that they said? Oh, there it is right there. You could pull it up anywhere you are. There will be more of that coming out. We plan on trying to do a couple workshops and stuff, maybe get some environmental agencies to come in just to kind of teach people, the best way. I know a lot of people, when they plant trees, they're worried about the rub. If they could come out and just show people how to put a tree ring around your tree, or, give a seminar on, hey, we've used these repellents, they've worked. So yeah, we are looking forward to that kind of stuff. I think that's one of the things that this committee was missing last year. It was kind of like to keep up with people, constantly remind them, post. I mean, people get their news now from social media, let's face it. I know most people don't watch the news. Most people don't, we get the newsletter, but there's only so much you can put in the newsletter. Now having a nice digital archive basically to store everything, tips, tricks, everything like that. It's going to help people so that when they need to recall what works, what doesn't work, it's a nice, easy way to do it. And then the same thing with workshops, the same thing with just following up, because at the end of the day, the deer are here to stay, whether we're culling or not. There's always going to be deer in Churchill. There's been deer way before Churchill. There'll probably be deer way after Churchill. But just intelligence, getting people to, hey, this is the right way to do this, rather than don't throw $500 into your landscaping just for it to all get mowed down. Make informed decisions, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help.
So, yes.
I don't want to take up too much time because I believe this is why.
That's okay. My head's spinning right now. I'm not even sure what I'm going to say.
So to go off of what you said,
Yeah.
you were right and she's right. So there have been studies done at Penn State for many years now looking at browse interest for deer. It is equally at random, but also equally at preference. So what they would do is they would have 15 or 20 buckets, 5-gallon buckets full of different kinds of browse, and whether it be leafy greens, fruits, nuts, grasses, they have it all. They put them in random arrangements. That way there's nothing repetitive for the deer. It's like, oh, I just eat out of bucket one. And they noticed that the deer actually have preferences over what they like and what they don't like. Some deer will have more of, will nibble more on like crabapple branches. Other deer will head towards like rose bushes and other stuff like that. It's kind of like us. Like I myself, I like a good solid rack of ribs, and I'm not a fan of Brussels sprouts, But I know my brother, he'll eat everything. I've never seen one person overeat and undereat at the same time. It baffles me. But to go off of that, deer will go after what's available, and then they'll also go after what they like. So if you have daylilies in your yard and they're getting mowed down, but meanwhile someone 2 blocks away has their hosses getting taken out, it's not the same deer going after it. It's 2 different deer, and both of them think that your plants are delicious. However, if you have a yard full of just Pachysandra, right, and that's all you have, and for some reason all of the deer decide to stay there for 2 days, all they can eat is Pachysandra, they're going to eat the Pachysandra. So I just want to say there are truths to both of your opinions. And for Professor Rory, I'll just call you Rory. You are right in terms of if the deer are constantly going to move around and they're going to reach a carrying capacity. However, if you look at why they move, the deer that are going to be moving 6 miles, that happens whenever typically that's going to be a buck whenever he's in rut, because he's going to be looking for girls for 3 months constantly because he's just jacked up on hormones. It's going to be someone who is in a high predation area and is looking to get away from predators such as black bear or coyotes, or he's in an area of high traffic and low food sources, and it has to go from this portion of property here 6 miles away to a better portion of property, and for some reason in between that, nothing is very habitable for that. And I understand that deer are constantly going to move. However, there's a difference between territory and home range. A territory is where that herd moves ever. So this herd in Penn Hills, they've been seen off of Upper Rodi Road. They've been seen in my backyard. However, there's a difference between a territory and a home range. A territory is where they're going to move under any conditions. Under preferable conditions, those deer are going to be under a home range, and the home ranges are much smaller. They're around 2 to 5 acres. 20 to 25 acres in size. And you'll see that more often with does that have fawns, because she has to be near the baby at all times, but that baby is typically too small in order to keep up with her all day. So she'll go and graze while the baby stays put, but she can't be 6 miles away. She'll be a couple 100 yards or even like a quarter of a mile, maybe at most. So I agree that, the deer are constantly going to be moving, but if we give them a good home range that they're able to settle down in and not be moving around the whole territory that they typically traverse, then that will be more beneficial for the homeowners in terms of giving their plants longer amount of time to recuperate from being grazed upon.
Okay.
Yeah, can I just add?
Okay.
I wasn't trying to suggest that deer are going to whatever. The 6 mile thing, that was actually a female who had given birth in one area, moved 6 miles to another area, came back 2 years later to the original area where she gave birth. So I think I just say that to say that we know kind of a lot less than we think we do about how deer actually move. There's something else I was going to respond to as well. Left my mind. But
All right. I think it's your turn. Would you like to get up and tell us what it is that you came to say tonight?
And I think it's changed completely from the beginning of the meeting.
Oh, can you tell us who you are?
Yes, I'm Sue Weigel. I moved here in 2018 to help my son and his growing family raise their children. My husband and I still both work some. he happens to be a horticulturist, garden writer, garden designer, garden lecturer, teacher. He does everything garden and news-related kind of things, travel, that kind of stuff. And I'm a registered nurse.
Now I'm recognized.
He is the one that should be here, and he wouldn't come. Because he thinks he knows the way it's going to go, and I'm the one that feels if you don't try, you're part of the problem. So, anyway, so just to recap some of the stuff that had been said, I think if we have healthier deer, we're going to have more of them.
Right.
So that's a concern for me. And when they eat all the native understory stuff, the non-native stuff takes over. So that's another issue. And the funny thing when I was doing all this research, because every time I would do something, it would be like sparking another idea. So then I'd be Googling more. And then I would find my husband's research. So now I'm going to quote some of the stuff that he has come out with just because I actually found his stuff when I was Googling. So one of the things was the Penn State wildlife specialist, Dr. Gary San Julian, says that 5 males and 5 females produce up to 200 deer in 5 years.
Wow.
That to me is a lot of deer. And they consume 4 to 8 pounds of food a day, and that's a lot of hosta. And the foraging that they do affects all wildlife, everything, because their predators won't have, the wildlife, the smaller wildlife won't have places to live, food to eat. And then the birds won't have the small animals to eat. It's a whole cycle of problems. And I also hope that we don't let the complications of all this keep us from doing something. Hope it doesn't let us stifle us. So you can probably figure out which way I'm leaning and how passionate I am about this. Where we moved from, it was the groundhogs. They were little problems. And now, between the soil, the weather, and the deer are huge problems. And we are huge gardeners. That's what we do. We live at our house. We play at our house. Everything at our home. So that's and it's really, really, really hard. Anyway, I'm thank you for this opportunity to even talk. And I better grab my glasses because I don't want to get any of this wrong. I'm a believer in being a nurse. I'm a believer in evidence-based medicine and facts and figures and data. So plus I'm emotional about this. I have a passion about this, but I try to keep more to the evidence and what has been learned so far. We don't have to reinvent the wheel with all this. Our surrounding communities have already put in a lot of work, so why don't we use some of that? Which would also probably save us some money. I think something I was disappointed in was I did not see an invitation to join your committee. I looked back through all the newsletters, and I could have missed it, but I missed it. I looked back through 2021, I couldn't find it. I found something on, after the fact, just a couple weeks ago, Facebook, I think I saw it. Do you have any idea?
That's why we have these committee members, because they saw that and stepped forward.
I could not find it, and I looked, and I looked, and I looked, and I looked.
Well, and in all fairness, I mean, we had been down the broader committee route before, and what we tried to do this time was to attract people to this endeavor who had professional experience that was going to be, we can all just express our point of view about how we feel about this. but digging into it, and I basically read for a year. Digging into it, things are always more complicated. I know you'd like to say things are always more complicated than they seem. One of the things that's, I think, very difficult about this is that, we're all intelligent people, and we go to the internet and we look up all this stuff and we read all this stuff. And on the whole, my takeaways from a lot of this is the examples that you're reading about, the studies you're reading about, the things that municipalities have done, have to be put on the 3,000 person Churchill that abuts all these other municipalities. And so whatever, for example, what's your measure of success? If you have a plan, a management plan, how do you measure success? That is extremely, extremely difficult to do, and it's extremely expensive to do, because the studies that have been done that are scientifically the most sound, they capture the deer, they tag the deer, that's how they count the deer, and in a small municipality, you're going to tag a deer that's going to end up, in Penn Hills. So how do you measure success? If you're going to, in my case, if you're going to use taxpayers' dollars to create a program, you can't do that responsibly without being able to say to people, this is our success, or this is our measure of success. What's interesting to me tonight is that we have heard practically only about yards. And
I talked about the impact to the deer and the people.
And I will speak to that as well. Not just eating
Okay.
plants.
I haven't heard anything about ticks.
And property value.
Oh, property value. Well, yeah.
It affects the community's property.
I think that gets into, though, part of what Rory is saying, that this is not unique to us. Everybody around us is having these same problems. Everybody in Allegheny County is having these same problems. Most people in Pennsylvania are having these same problems.
Should all be working together.
Well, and I don't want to, you go ahead and finish.
Should I go ahead, or do you want to? Okay. In regards to tagging the deer, if that's the thing that you think we have to do in order to determine numbers and the outcomes of the effectiveness of the plan, why don't we just not count the deer and use the effects of what the deer have done?
Right.
Explain that.
The disease, like the ticks, the understory plants, the loss of the critters, and
Who's going to do that doing?
the volunteers.
Volunteers?
I don't know. I'm not deciding that.
Well, see, that is-
I'm just presenting what I feel.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand.
If I could come up with a solution and think about it. But I'm just thinking that might be an alternate way of, instead of counting the deer, tagging the deer, if that's really expensive, would it be less expensive to figure out the effects of what they've done?
So I want to make sure I'm hearing you right. So what you're talking about is doing basically an inventory of what's in people's yards and then determining what's being destroyed and what's not being destroyed.
All that and the accidents, the cases of Lyme's disease, and I'm going to speak to some of that one here. So I just wanted to let you know, I love nature, I love animals, I love people, and I love the environment. However, they're not mutually exclusive when it comes to this issue. As a registered nurse, I previously worked in a head injury unit, and I can tell you that some people suffer a fate worse than a vehicular accident from a deer, death from that. Their fate is sometimes not dying from it and having that be worse. And I can also tell you that the deer suffer sometimes worse than being killed by a vehicle. And I've had that happen. I hit a deer, and so I know what the deer in the headlight saying is all about. And never forget it. I'll never forget the look. I remember it like it was yesterday, and it was in 1990 something. And I hit him. He was able to walk to the hillside, and I had to look at that deer every day to and from work, lay over there. Who knows how long he lived and suffered. I'm a nurse. I don't like to see people suffer. I want to help. How long he laid there and suffered. Even after he turned into a skeleton, he was still there, and I had to still look at that thing. It has left an impact on me. And also the accidents that you mentioned, this is just a side note, that have decreased, those are the reportable ones probably. I had an accident that wasn't a reportable one. I didn't have to report. There are some mandated reported deer accidents. Mine is not. So there's
Problem is that as far as data is concerned, again, getting back to the issue of when the Borough Council spends money on something, on taxpayers' money on something, we can only go on the data that we have. Right. So when the police reports, the public services staff supports, they were very consistent in telling us that there's been a very significant reduction in those collisions. And I think, my personal point of view is I think people are more careful. I think that they're more vigilant.
I don't know.
There's no data for that either, but I'm just saying the data that we have as a council.
But you also know that the data is going to be less than the reality because of unreported.
Job of getting people to report, I don't know.
Yeah, there's probably
more beneficial.
Yeah, some other way of figuring out the real data. Anyway,
Can I just say that, like, that is something we talked about as a committee. Like, could we have some kind of centralized thing where someone could go and report, my entire bed of hostas got, decimated last night, or I hit a deer. So we have a better idea, like, in terms of just.
so the effects of what the deer are doing is probably a better thing than even knowing how many there are.
Right, exactly. Because the first thing we need to know is do we actually have a problem? And I think, like, everyone in this room, no matter where you stand, probably has had some sort of negative run-in with a deer, right? Yep. Myself included. But, like, does that reach the level of, like, a community level health concern, safety concern, property value concern? We don't know that yet.
Well, the money that I have spent, the thousands and thousands of dollars that I have spent, that I have lost. Well, first of all, that I have spent trying to prevent the deer, and then replacing what they have destroyed. I could have easily put that towards your committee, and we just need to figure out a better way than what we're doing. Anyway, let me keep going here. Sorry I don't have it memorized.
No.
And I can tell you, deer-resistant plants don't work. My husband researches this. He does it every day for a living. We trial plants at our house. Everything is plants. So he knows the deer resistant. He publishes the deer resistant plants. When these deer are hungry, they're going to eat. Just like you and I, we're going to eat. People eat other people when they're hungry. If there's nothing else available, that's going to happen. We've tried homemade deer deterrents. I have purchased coyote urine upon coyote urine, gallons of it. They get used to these things. They're smart enough to know that there's no coyote. They ate my whole ginkgo tree, and no coyote came after them. So as a matter of fact, they're not even afraid of me. I can be running out there in the middle of the night and chasing them and growling, and they just stand there and look at me. So they're not afraid of us. We've also used the ultrasonic machines. And of course, the neighbors didn't like the noise, so we had to stop using them. We turned it down. It wasn't effective then. We've tried everything. Pittsburgh and Mount Lebanon, well, a lot of other places have these programs as well to manage their deer situation. I wasn't going to read Mount Lebanon's plan, but I think I might, just because, and I know it's not Churchill, but sometimes you can pull things that might work. I think part of the biggest problem is that people, first of all, they don't know what they don't know, and they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the information. So I think I'm going to read that to you in a minute.
I like to hear
Because I don't think, some of what you said, I don't think some people even, well, anyway, that's something else. All right. I'll read that in just a minute. And I'll also, Pittsburgh has a program, and Mount Lebanon, and just go on the internet and read their plans, read their programs. I think Aaron mentioned about the food programs. Pittsburgh's program benefits and outcomes, some of what they have done, and this was from March of 2024. 108 deer were harvested in Riverview and Frick Parks. 59 deer donated to local food banks. That equaled 2,360 pounds of venison. 9,440 meals were served, and there were no public safety incidents. That's impressive.
it is.
Now, either if that's true, that's impressive. I'm taking it as truth. I mean, it's an official Pittsburgh document that you can find, anybody can find online. I was impressed with that. Deer management programs have been proven to regulate the deer population and in turn provide increased public safety, help restore the damage caused to the environment and the other animals, reduce disease and accidents. And I know one of the comments in the newsletter was that deer do not transmit, I could probably read it, but I won't. Deer do not transmit Lyme disease. Pennsylvania was the number one state for Lyme disease for quite a while. But anyway, so it has been proven to work. Now, just to reiterate, this is Mount Lebanon's plan, not mine. It's not my opinion. Which I also hope when the committee makes their decision, they make it based on, not on opinions. It sounds like the people that are on the committee have the experience and can get the data and they can do the research. So that's awesome. I don't want it to be based on my passion or an opinion of somebody. I would really like the actual facts and data used. Mount Lebanon employs two types of safe and effective deer management: archery and sharpshooting. The original plan, created in 2014, was conceived to decrease deer vehicle accidents, which are a major concern in this part of the country. A side note, Pennsylvania, I think, used to be number one in deer vehicular accidents. They're now number 3, behind West Virginia and Montana. The number of deer vehicular crashes, often with injuries and/or property damages, have increased dramatically as the deer population has grown in Mount Lebanon. Mount Lebanon's densely developed 6.2 square miles. How many miles do we have?
2.7.
2.7 square miles? Okay, they have 6.2 square miles. So it's not comparing apples to apples, but the program also addresses the public concern about Lyme disease and overbrowsing of native vegetation, which I had already mentioned. In addition to causing accidents, deer extensively damage the young trees in our parks and my house, evidence to which can be found by looking at the state of our woodland parks. Native plants in our parks, both natural and volunteer planted, are already subjugated by invasive species. Excessive pressure from the deer population has hampered natural woodland regeneration and volunteer efforts to help. The Mount Lebanon Nature Conservancy, invests significant volunteer time and effort into planting new trees in our municipal parks and has reported substantial damage to tree plantings in the past due to deer foraging. Effectively managing the size of the deer herd in Mount Lebanon is an important part of maintaining a vibrant and sustainable tree canopy throughout our parks and woodlands. White-tailed deer can have a significant effect on forest health, species composition, and economic development. Because deer are herbivores, they dedicate a considerable amount of time to foraging, which can lead to several negative impacts when the population is unbalanced. Deer may browse herbaceous plants, shrubs, seedlings, lowering local abundance of these plants. Browsing impairs plant regeneration and natural succession. Heavy browsing reduces the height, the density, and the diversity of the forest understory and midstory, lowering the habitat value for the other animals. Deer tend to avoid particular plants, leading to a shift in plant composition, often dominated by non-native plants and more invasive species.
I'm afraid I have to ask you how much longer that is, because it's 7:53. We only have 7 minutes left for the rest of the folks.
I'd be happy to share this with anybody if you want to give me your email.
It's on their website.
It is on their website. The most important thing, really, with the archery call and the sharpshooting was how they do it, how meticulous they are in who they get to do it, as well as Pittsburgh, who they get to do it, how they get the people. You don't have to worry about any hooligan going out, at least not under their watch. That's not who they hire. They're meticulous, they're professional. They do it in a way that is not harmful to the surrounding homes, the surrounding schools, anything else.
Did they tell you in the report where the shooting happens?
Yes, they did, and they did hire the Suburban Wildlife Management Solutions.
Yeah, many people do.
To help them.
What's the location that they're in?
As well as municipal parks. They did not mention the cost.
I know the cost was around $70,000.
In Mount Lebanon.
Mount Lebanon.
Yeah.
My daughter lives in Mount Lebanon.
For 60 deer.
And I know Pittsburgh is expanding because it has been working. But how they take the sharpshooters and put them up on buildings, so they're shooting down. So they're shooting down. So there's no ricocheting and.
My case is they're all public parks.
But it also mentions what this young man said about you have, if I could have just read the whole thing, you have private people that also are in agreement to allowing that to happen on their property.
In their yards.
Yeah.
That's a separate program they have to get approval for.
And there's separate licenses and so anyway, it was a really good.
I think we are all in agreement that there's something needs to be done with the population here. It's just how do we go about doing it? I find it kind of interesting that the last meeting, this half of the room was kill all those deer immediately. That half of the room was like, don't touch the Bambi.
No, that's not correct. You've had two or maybe three women who got up right away and said, I love the deer.
Don't touch it.
And you pointed out that they did not live in Churchill, and one of them said, I would rather shoot a deer or shoot a person than shoot a deer. And everybody else who got up, I was thinking, do I want to say that I want to Colleen when she's in here?
Right.
And she might be here tonight. I don't know. I don't think.
Example,
the
because
bottom line is the cost.
that
What can we afford to do?
individual lives in another municipality in the same neighborhood. So they feed the deer.
And there are only two people. I want to change. I want this narrative because Jade Warren has done the same thing in a council meeting. You know, oh, half the people wanted to save the deer, half loved the deer. That was not what happened at the last meeting. I'm sorry, I'm all up in arms.
No. It's the other thing that we need to, the other reality we need to see is that this meeting was very widely advertised. We have 8 people here. 11? Yeah, just one second. I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to respond to some of what Susan said.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of data out there, there's a lot of studies that show, like, once a community decides, yes, we need to do something about the deer, lethal removal is the most effective way. Like, there's, like, birth control, there's contraception, all those other things. Lethal control is the way, and I don't think there's any real disagreement here that, like, if we decided to do that, we could do it safely, right? Like, if we decided to put sharpshooters in Bullock Pens Park and let them shoot as many as they could, like, we could do that safely, probably. I think the bigger issue is a couple things, right? Those same publications that say that say you need 2 things. You need long-term financial support and you need long-term political support. You can't just do this once and expect it to solve the problem. You have to do it every single year.
I can tell you as a fact, for someone that has family that lives in Mount Lebanon, they very much still have a deer problem.
That's right.
So the other thing, one second, can I finish? The other thing that you need is broad political support. And to Diane's point, we're not sure if we have that in the borough. I'm not trying to dismiss anyone's problems. Like I said, we all have had these issues, but as a community as a whole, do we have the political support to say this is a big enough problem that we need to start culling deer? We don't know that
Well, and that
right
we're
now.
willing to commit the tax dollars that are necessary
Exactly, yeah.
to do it. I think you're all going to see in the next year or so the real crisis in other places to spend this money. We have to be very sure that what we are doing is what the majority of people in our borough want us to do, because they're going to be paying for it.
Can I?
Sure.
There is a committee. Who actually is going to make the decision?
7 council members.
Okay, so that's my thing is, I know it's a good thing. Talk to the community, talk to the people, get the ideas, this and that. Who's actually going to make it? And just saying this, committee says, okay, we're going to have to do the sharpshooting and all of that. It doesn't make any difference if they get feedback from or funding from the community, right? It's a thing that needs to be done. Well, I don't mean to say that. I know I'm not saying that right.
No, I understand.
But somebody's got to say, okay, you know what? Here, I'm signing this paper. It's a done deal. Let's do it. But it's done to improve what all of these meetings and all these committees are for. So can you guys just say, hey, this is what can somebody just say, hey, this is the plan we come up with, this is what we do. I know, Susie, you don't want that to happen over there, and Johnny, you're right about that over there. But can we just have a committee that says, okay, this is it, this is the only way for us to effectively do it, just like when the polio shots come out. Okay, this is what it is, everybody's getting them. You got to do it, so it has to be done.
Let me just respond to that quickly. And again, it's difficult to. I'll try. When you are elected as a borough council member, first of all, your responsibility is to the entire community, and so the first thing is determining what the entire community, and that's a majority, what they want. We just said that we don't have that. Okay, but secondly, if I send to you a tax bill that has gone up by $1 million, okay, how many people do you think in the borough of Churchill are going to say, that's great, we're going to raise the taxes $1 million to kill the deer? So those are the kinds of considerations that council members have to make. We have to ask a lot more complicated questions and be accountable, just be totally accountable to the public. So we have to be able to prove, that any recommendations that we make as a committee and submit to the council are factual, and that includes serving, all the things we've been talking about. But at the end of the day, those 7 people have to make a decision on behalf of 3,000 people.
Right. And I think that's what we're asking outside of the box. Do we have to do it in tax money?
I don't know how else. Yes, as a matter of fact, because it has to be approved as an entity. The borough council is the political entity of this borough, and in order for us to do these kinds of programs, even if it's a private property, right? You have to have a municipality approve of and pay for the program. There's no.
With tax money is the only way you can do that. You can't have a fundraiser. We have a golf club. These golfers are crazy about their golf.
I don't ask them if they're willing to spend tax dollars on killing 60 deer.
I'm talking fundraising.
Okay, well, what it all amounts to is that we need a lot. I'm sorry, you've been waiting. Just a sec.
I've asked 4 times.
All right, and I'm acknowledging you right now.
No,
go ahead.
Well, I just want could people raise money and donate it to the borough to help cover this?
If the borough, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think so. I don't think the law would permit that.
That's the only thing I'm going to.
That might be a question for the solicitor.
Yeah, well, these are it's the programs that you have to have are the USDA program or the Game Commission program. Both of those cases, private individuals can't fund those things.
To pay for it, and I know this man has been sitting here and has not gotten to ask anything, so I'm going to quit talking with him.
Thank you. Can I ask the lady that gave an excellent talk, the 5 deer that reproduce, how many new deer was that number?
200.
Yeah, I know. I just want everybody to know.
Okay, 5 males and 5 females produce up to 200 deer in 5 years.
Okay, all right. Everybody's heard that. The gentleman on the end, how long have you lived in Churchill?
It'll be 6 years in January.
I've lived here 24, and I disagree with you that when you reduce and kill the deer, nothing happens, or a year later, you have the same problem. The former mayor picked up the phone, and this was verified by the president of council. He picked up the phone in one day. He solved the problem. There was 7, 8, 9, 10 deer in my front yard when I moved in. When he did that, and whether it was 15 years ago, 18 years ago, that doesn't matter. It dropped like 70, 80%. So I disagree with you. My eyes saw the difference. Is there any way we can, this council here is going to recommend to the borough council, is it just you 4 people, or are there more people involved?
This is an ad hoc advisory committee. It is not a permanent committee of the council. Our charge was to gather information, and
that's not a question. Excuse me.
Trying to answer.
There's 4 people here. Are you the chairman of the committee?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to go back to Churchill Council. Okay. Is there any way we can put this lady on the council?
If she'd like to run for office, we
No,
can
on the
certainly do
committee.
that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you interested in running
On
for
this
office?
committee.
No, he's
On
on
this
the
committee.
committee.
On this committee.
Yeah, and I want to say I volunteered 3 times to be on this committee,
Yeah.
twice in writing.
See,
Yes, you did.
And
Yeah.
I
We
didn't
feel
join,
that
but I
from
think
this
you would be
committee.
excellent.
Ad hoc, whatever you want to call it.
Can she get put on?
Yes, we would like to have somebody like that on the committee.
I need to know the commitments.
well, that's the deal. Where we are right now is that this ad hoc committee has been appointed by the Churchill Borough Council. Our committee has the responsibility of producing a recommendation for the council. That recommendation has to be based on an amount of information that we feel comfortable making a recommendation to the council. We're still gathering information.
Okay. My only comment is, I see a very different, down-to-earth, realistic, she's a nurse and she works off of tests, scientific evidence, and I sense that from her. I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't sense that from you. I sense you putting up brick walls. And that's why I'd like to have somebody like her. Someone gave the figure of 70,000. That was for an area, Mount Lebanon, more than twice the square footage of Churchill. I just spent $80 spraying. And the lady over there recommends a fund or put out a newsletter. Would you like to donate to bring in 100? I'll donate $100 right now. There's 3,000 people. What's $30,000? We spend many, many more times every year spraying than that.
Yeah, I probably spent $10,000.
This is our feeling. Once again, if there's some way to get somebody with her common sense in that committee, I think it'd be moving faster, better.
Well, I can tell you that, again, this committee was created to provide recommendations to the council. What the council does with those recommendations are going to be based on a lot of factors. And there are things that we have to consider that people in the public don't necessarily have to consider. And that boils down to staffing, what kinds of monitoring have to be done to safely do things, who's going to do that. It's who's doing the doing, and most importantly, what I said to you before, how do you justify taxpayers' dollars being spent if you can't define what success is? And so one of the things you talked about a survey, getting everybody involved, and that's the kind of information that you would have to have in order to understand that the tax dollars that you're spending have been spent appropriately.
I have a feeling the tax dollars that we're all spending, we're probably not all in agreement that they're being spent appropriately. So you can't always have 100% of the people agreeing. So if you're expecting 100% of the people to agree to the tax dollars being spent, well, that's not going to happen. Just as not 100% agree that certain roads should be fixed, or
it's
the police income.
That's where we get, it's complicated, because we don't ever expect 100% of people to agree with what the council does, but we do have to have the sense, if we're going to do something new and spend taxpayers' dollars to do something new, that we at least have to have the sense that majority of people in the borough want that.
How do you do that?
Well, part of it, I think tonight's a good example.
And the last meeting too was a good example.
Well, we have,
And during Amazon, you had 100 people at every single meeting saying, don't do this. And
let's
you-
not
you
get
guys
into
voted on it.
Amazon. This
So
is
I
not
just wanna throw that
Amazon.
out there.
Please, let's not revisit
And I
Amazon.
just say thank you for your service, before I forget to say that, and thank you to the committee for your hard work. And Diane, I know that you have submitted your letter of resignation, and I want to thank you for Diane stepping off the council, whichever I
It's been my pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much.
But meanwhile, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll make this quick. Whenever Mrs. Weigel was talking about some way to do reports, and you said, well, how are we going to do reports if we don't know whether or not it's going to be successful or not? The beauty of ArcGIS maps are they're very easy to make. I'm not going to talk about like who's going to make them or how long it's going to take. It's a program that's been around since I think the 90s or early 2000s, and you use it for geospatial maps of the area. Wonderful. What I was trying to convey whenever I was speaking was the borough spends either taxpayer money, or they do like a big bake sale kind of thing, or some kind of fundraiser, which all of the proceeds would go towards something such as trail cams. Trail cams are nice because it is a non-direct, or it's an indirect form of monitoring and information gathering. It happens overnight. It happens on weekends. It happens on whenever all the banks are closed. And what's nice about that is if you're able to put them in either heavily trafficked areas, or better yet, if you're trying to go for non-bias, if you put them in random locations across the entire borough, allowing, of course, like people give you permission, like, hey, throw this in my backyard, something like that. Take the trail cams and use that as information as to how many deer are here during this time of day and when. Look to see where the regular movements are across the entire borough. And you're going to have a success rate of 0% because we don't know where they are right now. We know their general movements, but we don't know specifically who's where and what times and how long or how many of them. If you at least put up trail cams, that will give you much more data, much more information than you have now. And you can use that to make a more educated decision on whether or not these deer are legitimately a problem. Is it going to get worse? Is it going to get better? Furthermore, if you don't want to spend the money on trail cams, just have like a neighborhood watch site. There's already one for this area in Churchill, in Penn Hills. My mom is on it, and every day she's like, "Oh, someone saw this today. Well, that's cool." Make like a sister page or something, just focused on deer sightings, not deer damage. You're gonna overflood reports with, "Oh, my gardenias are eaten." Cool. Save that for another thing. Let's focus on where the deer are. And if you have 50 people out of the 3,000 every day saying, hey, at 3:15, I saw 5 in my backyard on Churchill Road. And at the same time, someone across the way is saying, hey, I live off of Greensburg Pike. I saw 3 at the Pace School Center. You're going to have so much more data and so much more information that's going to help you make a good decision as to what needs to happen where. So in regards to whether or not, we don't know if it's going to be a success, you're at 0% success rate now. That is going to exponentially increase that. And then you can use that to make decisions which will provide hopefully beneficial results. I'm not trying to be blunt. I'm not trying to be that. I just wanted to say, I brought up that idea. I don't know if you guys jotted it down or not, but I just wanted to reiterate that. That is, I think, a very good option for this community, especially since we are on a money constraint. And if people say, I don't know if this is going to work, it works with the Audubon Society, which is across the entire country and even the entire continent. There are members in Mexico and Canada that help monitor bird migrations every year. It's going to work.
I just have to say, it is 8:15.
Yes.
We are 15 minutes over time. And we have actually some people who have family from out of town waiting for them to come home. So I'm happy to stay.
Last question of the committee. What is your plan?
Yes.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
To reach your decision to give the council what's going on?
And when, by when?
Yes.
Well, briefly, my look was, there were 3 areas here. There's garden adverse effects, there's vehicle individual adverse effects, and there's the issue of Lyme disease. The issue of Lyme disease is a non-issue. There is no governmental agency, CDC, NIH, Allegheny County Health Department, that advocates culling as a solution. The reason is, as you pointed out, when the deer overpopulate, all these other creatures become underpopulated. When you eliminate the deer, the ticks get onto Fido, your dog, they get onto squirrels, they get onto raccoons. So the rate of deer population, tick population does not change. Now there are exceptions. If you look at islands, small islands, you can make that change. But in a generally populated area, the ticks find a new home. Okay. The incidence of Lyme disease, and you asked for specific references. There's a beautiful reference on the incidence of Lyme disease when you do culling. It doesn't change. Now, that doesn't negate the damage to gardens. It doesn't negate the possibility of vehicular individual adverse accidents. And I think you mischaracterized this committee. I particularly was in favor of culling, and I think we've heard some great things from Mr. Markowitz tonight. So this committee is not opposed to culling. I think the problem is we don't want to all go to jail as a consequence. The only place where you can shoot them, if I'm wrong, is Bullocks Pen Park. So we need to know what we can do. I personally am in favor of culling without going to prison. okay? It's sort of a small point.
What is your deadline? You mentioned Diana, and congratulate, and we appreciate the time you put in.
Thank you.
When do you resign?
There's no deadline. There's no deadline.
Well, someone said you're
Well,
going to go to council with a report. Is that
Our
correct?
intention is to act responsibly. And in acting responsibly, what we have to do is to prepare a report
Yes, I heard
for the
that.
council
What is the
that
date
is
or
sound.
month
We're
or
not
the
there yet.
year?
We're
Or
not
for
there
the
yet.
year?
First of all, I won't be here.
Right, now, that's the next question.
That's
When
the
are you
second
stepping
thing.
down?
The second thing is it's an ad hoc committee,
Okay.
so that the council will determine where we go from here. These individuals,
Okay.
So
So
are.
council's going to replace you with somebody?
I don't know. That's not my province.
Oh, what month are you stepping down?
Now.
Now, okay. So there's 3 left, and at the next council meeting, this will be discussed, or if the ad hoc committee should even continue.
If we don't have a report, if we don't have a report by the next council meeting,
Okay, I didn't hear that. So
it
next
won't
council
be
meeting-
on the agenda because they will not have received a report from this committee.
So if you do submit a report at the next council
Mhm.
meeting, they're going to
Absolutely.
read it or they're going to discuss it.
Absolutely.
And then at some point down the road, council's going to make
Well,
a
then
decision.
it's action at that point, and I really want to stop because people are having to go. I promised 8:00. When the
Okay, you've answered my
when the
question.
council
Thank you.
considers the
Next
issue, they have to consider the entire issue.
Sure.
They have to consider the cost. They have to consider the cost benefit. They have to consider the rationality of doing it, given the location and the surrounding other people. What everybody wants is for council to have a magic wand to get rid of the deer. We don't have one.
Well,
And
our participation is helping.
Absolutely.
Like at this council meeting, instead of bringing in 1,000 hunters, wouldn't it be nice to bring in 1, 2 hunters? And there is an area that we can do this and start the program. Could we make that recommendation?
council can't legally do that.
They can or
No,
cannot?
they can't.
Okay.
They can't. There has to be, if you're going to do this, there has to be a very detailed, specific program with lots of information in it, and it has to be done, in accordance with a lot of very good rules and
So
regulations.
if you recommend to do this,
Yeah.
in 1 month, you're not going to have that report. So then somebody else, some other committee, is going to have to prepare this detailed procedure going forward.
The council has to have a basis for taking action.
Oh, so then if you say no to bringing in hunters, the council doesn't have any
That's
need
entirely
to
up, that's entirely up to the president of the council.
But I said, if you say no, we're not going to go with hunters,
Yeah.
then they don't have to do anything for these detailed procedures. So pretty much, bringing in a hunter will be over if this committee says no.
I wish it weren't as complicated as it is, but it is.
Oh, I know it's complicated.
And I've tried to. The council has to abide by the law. Okay, and that doesn't mean that we can just decide that we want to have some hunters go down to Bullock's Bend Park and we'll invite our friends to do that and they'll kill some
No, I
deer.
said professional, not friends.
Okay.
Like 1 or 2 professional hunters, and you mentioned it was be $500 a deer.
Well, that I don't.
We're spending
Don't
hundreds
hold
of
me to that. It might be more at this point.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
But at least
Okay.
we know, if you
I
say
appreciate
yes.
your input. I appreciate everybody's input. Every bit of information that we get from members of the public is helpful to us. But I'm sure you've heard tonight and that you already know that these are very, very complex things. And taking action by the council is something that cannot be done without a factual basis. And that requires data, as you're right. Okay. So, thank you for coming tonight. I am happy to stay after the meeting, but I think our or our committee members deserve to get back to their families this evening.